Hi everyone, welcome back. Let's write some more Leetcode today. Today we are solving find all possible recipes from given supplies. So the problem states that we are given an array called recipes, and each index in recipe corresponds to the ingredients array, and each string on the recipe, it requires the corresponding ingredients. And we are also given an array of supplies that contains all the ingredients that we may initially have. And based on that, we want to create a list of all the recipes that you can create. And we may return the answer in any order. So if we look at these two examples, in example 1, we want to see if we can make bread. And bread will require yeast and flour. And based on the supplies, we do have yeast and flour, so we can make bread. So we'll return that as our output. And in example 2, we have bread and sandwich. So bread will require yeast and flour, which we do have that in supplies, so we can add bread to the result. And for sandwich, it will require bread and meat. And we already know that we can create bread because bread has yeast and flour. And we also see that for meat, we do have meat in supplies, so we can make a sandwich. So we can add sandwich to result, and we will return this as our output. So now that we have seen some examples, let's get to how we can solve this problem. So before I get to how we can solve this problem, I just want to show that we'll basically be making a graph like this. So for this example, burger will require bread, meat, and sandwich. And we see that sandwich will require bread and meat, and bread will require yeast and flour. So the only way where we cannot create a certain recipe is if we see a cycle between two elements. So like if burger requires bread and bread requires burger, if that is the case, then we will not be able to make bread or burger because they require each other. So how we can solve this problem is first we will make a supply hash map which would match the supplies that we have, and it will all be initialized to true. And we will also make a recipe hash map which will match with the recipes input array that we are given, with the food as the keys and the index as the values, so it can correspond to ingredients. And we will look through each recipe one by one. So as we look through, we will look at the ingredients it requires. If the ingredients are in supplies, then we can return true right away. And if all the ingredients return true, then we know that we can make that food, and we will add that food to the resulting array. And as soon as we know that we can make a certain food, we will also add that to the supply. So in case in the future, if other foods require this certain food, that can also check out as a supply that we have. So let's go over this example real quick. So we'll start with bread, and if we look into bread, we see that it requires yeast and flour. Yeast and flour are both in supplies, so we can make bread. So we can add bread to result. And since we can make bread, we will also add bread to supply. And now we look at sandwich. Sandwich, we see that it needs bread, it needs meat. Meat is in supply, bread is also now in supply, so we can add sandwich to result. Now we look at burger. Burger requires sandwich, meat, and bread, and they are all in result, so we can add that to the resulting array as well. And by the way, a quick side note, let's say burger came before sandwich. So when we search through burger, sandwich wouldn't be on the supply yet. So when we come to that, we will first check if we can make sandwich. If yes, we will add sandwich to supply, and then eventually burger can also be added to supply. If we somehow cannot make sandwich, then we return false, then burger will also be false, and we wouldn't add it to the resulting array. So the time complexity of this problem would be O of R plus I plus S, where R stands for the recipes input array, I stands for the ingredients input array, and S stands for the supplies input array, because it may take S time to make this supply array, it may take R time to make this recipe array, and it may take I time when we search through the recipe to see if we can make a certain food. And the space complexity would be O of R plus S, because the supply array may take up to S space and the recipe array may take up to R space. So now let's get to the coding part. So first we will make the supply array. So S will be set to true for S in supplies. And then we'll make the recipe array. So we'll do food, and the value will be I for I and food in enumerate recipes. And now we'll make our search function where we search through the recipe and the ingredients in it. So DFS food. If food is in supply, then we'll return the supply of food. Otherwise, we need to set that food to false in supply, which means that we do not have that food as supply. And if the food is not in the recipe, then we gotta return false. So now we can look through the ingredients of that recipe. So ingredients of recipe of food, and then we will do the search on it. If it is not found, then we gotta return false. Otherwise, that means the food is available, so we'll add it to supply. So supply of food is true, and we want to return true. So we can set up the resulting array for food and recipes. We'll do a search on each of the food. If it's a food, and result.append food if it works, and we can return the resulting array. See if it works. Okay, perfect. Hope this was helpful. Thank you all for watching. If you have any other questions and comments, feel free to leave down in the comment section, and I hope to see you all again soon.